Do you know the use of all of the different yield resources in Civ 6? Let's talk about them. Now, when I say yield resource, I'm talking about the things that you get from working hex tiles and districts. Food, gold, production, faith, science, culture. I'll talk a bit about tourism as well. Tourism isn't a yield like the others in that you can't get it by working tiles. Tourism comes from things like wonders, great works, and city walls later in the game, but it does show up here on the yield report. No matter what victory type you're going for, you're going to need to understand all of these different resources and what they allow you to do. Let's start by talking about gold and production. We're going to talk about these together. They both have one main purpose, which is to build stuff that you want. Anything can be built over time with production. This is the base way that new units, districts, buildings, and projects get completed in your cities, especially at the start of the game. Gold allows you to buy many of these things immediately, but they have a few differences between the two that are important to understand. Production takes time, but some things like city walls and wonders can only be bought with production. Production is a local resource, meaning that it can only be used in the city that produces it. Gold is an empire resource, meaning you can produce it anywhere, but you can also use it anywhere as well. Gold produced in one city can be used to buy something in a different city. Gold also has an additional benefit in that you can use it to trade with other civilizations for things like luxury resources, strategic resources, great works, and a number of other political things. You can understand the exchange rate between gold and production by looking at how much things cost. If we look at a granary, for example, on standard speed, a granary costs 65 production to build. You can also buy that granary for 260 gold. So in that sense, one production equals 4 gold. Now, there are a few modifiers in the game that will change that value. As an example, you have the leader Mansa Musa, who receives a 30% production penalty to buildings and units. So if you're playing him as a leader, your exchange production to gold is 1 production equals 2.8 gold because of that 30% reduction in production. Now, no matter what your victory type, you're going to need a pile of both of these significant amounts of production and gold. They're going to be helpful for any of the victory types to get your civ built what needs to be built to win that game. Next, let's talk about faith. Faith can also be used to purchase things, but it requires a little bit more work and you don't have quite as many options to buy. Faith is also critical for building and establishing a religion. Now, you can always buy religious units with faith, starting off with the missionary, and once you have a temple, opening it up to apostles, inquisitors, and others. Faith is also used later in the game to buy naturalists and rock bands, which are important for a cultural victory. Now, you have a couple of things that increase the power of faith. One of those is the religious belief Jesuit education. If you get that as part of your religion, any city that has your religion as the religion will be able to buy campus and theater buildings. And to be clear, it doesn't actually even have to be your religion. Just the dominant religion in a city has to have the belief Jesuit education. If it does, in that city, you can then buy campus and theater buildings with faith. Another bonus to faith comes from being the suzerain of Valletta. Now, this is a military city-state, but it gives you the bonus that allows you to buy city setter buildings with faith. So this is like your granary, your monument, your sewers, any of those buildings that classify as city center buildings you can buy. You also have a governor, Moksha, and with the right promotions, you can buy districts with faith. Now, faith is critical if you're going for a religious victory. You can't win without a lot of it. To buy your missionaries, buy your apostles and others to help spread the good word, whatever that might be in your game. So you must have a lot of faith if you're going for a religious victory. Faith is also useful for a cultural victory because you're going to buy naturalists. Naturalists establish national parks, which increase your tourism, which leads you to a cultural victory. Also, rock bands allow you to increase your tourism and get other civilizations bought into your culture to get that culture win. It can be used by great people. There's also a golden era declaration that allows you to buy settlers and builders with faith. So it can be useful there potentially as well. But if you don't have a plan and you're not going for a religious or cultural victory, faith really doesn't do you much other good. Next on the list, food. Food has one job, and that's to grow your cities. It's the only reason food exists. For each level of your city, you need a certain amount of surplus food in order to reach that next level. So any surplus that you have in a city on each turn, that's going to go into your storehouse. And once that storehouse is filled to that level, your city grows one more level. Now, why do you want bigger cities? First off, science and culture are awarded based on the level of a city. Even with no districts in it, you're going to receive science and culture. And the bigger your city is, the more science and the more culture you're going to get. Also, the number of districts you can build in a city is determined by the level of the city. So you get one district at level 1, and then every 3 city levels after that, you can build an additional district. So when your city is level 4, you can build a second district. When your city is level 7, you can build a third district, and so on. Note that city growth is limited if you have either a housing or an amenities shortage. And in that case, in that city, food is not as valuable because the growth of that city is going to be limited. It's going to take more food to get the city to grow. So you're better off diverting resources into solving either a housing or an amenity shortage to continue to get the city to grow at its normal rate instead of dumping more food into a city that is unhappy or is short on housing. Next, we'll talk about science. One purpose for science, which is to unlock technologies from the tech tree. Without science, you're stuck in the Stone Age and you're throwing rocks at people and trying to poke them with sticks to defend your cities. Science is pretty easy to understand. Either you have it or you don't. What you do have goes into unlocking items from the tech tree. Every tech has a required price of science. Now, these values change based on the speed of the game that you're playing. But every tech has a required value. Every turn, the total science from your civilization gets added into that bucket. And when you get the amount needed for the tech that you're researching, that technology unlocks. All your victory types are going to require some amount of science because it's linked to the advancing in the tech tree. So you can't neglect this even if you're going for a diplomatic victory or a culture victory, religious victory, any of the other types. But you don't need to focus on it as much. If you're going for a science victory, me personally, I build campuses everywhere. Every city gets a campus, and I just push as much science as possible. But if you're not going for that science victory, it's not quite as heavy. I would say also if you're going for a domination victory, a heavy amount of science is required for that, just because you've got to stay at least on par with enemy tech. Because if you fall too far behind, you can get steamrolled. As bad as the AI is with combat, you can get steamrolled if you're fighting tanks with spearmen. Last, we'll talk about culture. Culture is another one of these dual purpose resources. It creates tourists which are needed to win a cultural victory and used to unlock civics from the civics tree. On the cultural victory side, this is by far the most complicated of victory types to achieve, and the game doesn't offer help with any real explanations of what's going on. The two resources are closely tied together, as many things that give you culture also give you tourism. The simple way to think about it is that culture is your defense against another civ winning a cultural victory, and tourism is your offense for you to win a cultural victory. Culture does also, within a city, expand the borders of that city faster. The higher your culture is, the more your city will, on its own, accumulate additional tiles around the city. Even if you're not trying to get a cultural victory, you'll need a healthy bit of culture to unlock the civics tree and defend against other civs, pulling out a cultural win. With this base understanding of different yield types, you're now armed to start thinking more strategically about how you plan your cities, where you build your cities, how you improve your tiles, so that you can target the most important resources to the victory type that you're going for. Watch this next video on how to select city sites to maximize a city's potential.